Okay. I'll give like a few seconds until like people like get in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay, sounds good. All right. Oh, welcome everyone. Today I'm joined here with attorney Philip N. For those who don't know, like Philip is the attorney responsible for in a law firm. He's the managing attorney, and basically today we're going to discuss the Visa Bulletin. And before we start, I always say that no one can predict the Visa Bulletin, and when the EB-2 category became current last month, it was a big surprise for everyone. Everyone was caught off guard. Uh, but even with that, like I would never imagine like to see the EB-3 category
Right.
becoming current, like anytime soon. So yeah, thanks for joining, Philip. What are your considerations? Like, why are we seeing like this movement? Why are things getting current?
Yeah, I think, first and foremost, we're just in such an unpredictable time. I mean, as you said, last month we didn't expect it to become current like that, in a way that it did. And, I think a lot of us are surprised. We can't really tell exactly why. Maybe just some certain visa spots are just opening up. I know there was been like a backlog for a couple months, and as the year goes on and progresses, um, you know, it just kind of opens up, and it just presents us a unique opportunity to kind of pursue all of our options moving forward, specifically with those who have become current. And so, happy to discuss this. It's a hopeful time and a joyous time, and it's our responsibility just to talk with everyone and kind of guide everyone through. So happy to be here.
And one thing, like that, when the Visa Bulletin, it became current like last month as well for the EB-3 category. A lot of people, they had, a couple of reactions. The first reaction was, I don't have an I-140 approved, let's rush into premium processing. The other reaction was, I do have an I-140 approved, let's schedule medicals. And I think like the gray area here is the third, situation where I have an I-140 pending. And this is my opportunity, that I've been waiting for years. And I want to like adjust my status, even though my I-140, is pending. Like, what do you think about, that scenario specifically?
So I think it presents again a unique opportunity. I think from my perspective, and we've discussed this at length too. When people come to us asking, about a pending status, I think one thing to do is risk management, because if you rush into adjusting your status without understanding your own situation first, it can present a lot of risks. Because even if you're pending, I-140, if that gets denied, then you just put in an application for an adjustment of status. You pretty much wasted your money by rushing into things a little too quickly. I think, again, taking a step back, understanding the present opportunity while assessing your situation, right? And I think, that's why we do what we do, because we want to help you get in that position to be able to assess your situation, help you not rush into anything. Because, even though this opportunity presents itself, you definitely want to take it and do it the right way, because the risk sometimes of rushing is just not worth all that money, all that time and effort, especially if you rush and then it ends up being denied, which then it discourages you even more. So that's kind of where we are.
And like even if for people that they're not thinking about applying for the adjustment of status right now,
Mhm.
but they are thinking about because it's current. Now they're thinking about upgrading to premium processing.
Mhm.
And what a lot of people, come and ask us is this going to is this going to trigger an RFE? Is this going to increase my my chances or my exposure, or is this going to increase my chance of denial? Like what do you think about this in this situation?
So I think there's a lot of, I guess, different interpretations of what's kind of going on, right? We've heard people upgrading from regular processing to premium and getting that, RFE. I think, one thing to consider when you're actually thinking about upgrading to premium is, how much time you spent on your initial application. Whoever you worked with, whether it was us or somebody else, how comfortable you are, with your application, and the evidence and sources that you've all gathered for yourself. I understand the want to get this done, get the approval quickly, especially given this golden opportunity that's come. But again, just taking a step back and thinking about potential risks that come from rushing. If you rush and get denied, you may prolong the entire process altogether, right? So just again, take a step back, assess the situation. And, again, that's why we're here. That's why whoever you're working with, they're there. And just, it helps us kind of analyze the situation, and, we work together to get you the best outcome while also counseling you on what specifically for you is, the best way forward.
No, yeah, that makes sense. And one thing that's it's also important because there have there are many people that came to the US and then they applied for the asylum. And asylum can take many, many, many years. I know people that have been waiting for over 15 years. And right now, they also applied for an I-140 application, and their priority date is now current. And they're debating, like, can I apply for adjustment status or not? And what is your take on that? Considering like that asylum by itself is not a status that usually you can adjust from.
Yeah, I mean, when you decide to adjust your status, you have to make sure your underlying status is valid. Nothing pending. Like, you need to have good legal status, right? And so what I always tell my clients is submitting an I-140 does not in and of itself give you status. And that is what everyone has to be aware of, right? So even throughout the pending period, even once that I-140 is approved, you technically still don't have status. It just means that your petition is approved, right? The whole reason why we're talking about the currency of all these visa bulletins, that gives the ability for one to adjust their status, right? And adjusting your status is essentially gaining legal status. So once that I-485 or the adjustment of status period is approved, that is when you can have legal status. So regardless of if it's asylum or another pending like H-1B, H-1, H-4, any of that, the underlying status always has to be legal and it has to be present. So, I don't want to say it's like a warning, but it's just, I want everyone to be aware that you should have underlying status no matter what before you decide to pursue I-140. Don't use the I-140 as your way of maintaining legal status, essentially.
No, yeah, that makes sense. And we have the visa bulletin here on the screen, and you know several times, like today, I just looked at it and was like, is EB-3 like really current? Like I still can't believe it. It's kind of unbelievable. And but also, other another jump that's been very prominent is India itself. So
Mm,
we, been talking to, yeah, actually, we talked today with one client that he
right.
had an I-140 approved from like a regular EB2. It was not an EB2 NW. He's from India. And if I'm not wrong, I think his priority date was something like February of 2014.
Hmm.
And when we first talked to him, like about 2 months ago, his priority date was not current. It was closed, but was not current. And then with a big jump, last month and this coming month, his priority date became current, and basically told him, hey, you have a very valuable commodity, which people from India would pay probably like millions of dollars to have, to be in your place, which is having a priority date, current.
Hmm.
Um, and the other thing, I was also, wanted to discuss is now people that have an I-140 approved, they have to go through the adjustment status or even the consular process. And the first thing they do is schedule their medicals. And I really wanted to bring this up because recently we had some cases where some clients, they went to specific clinics, and there they found out that they had basically all their vaccines again, even though they already had like everything that was on the list, because it's been like over 10 years. That specific clinic required them to take all those shots again. They got really really sick. Spent a lot of money. So one thing that we've been like, recommending like going forward is call the clinic before, make sure like what are their requirements in terms of vaccination, because you definitely don't want to get there and find out like once you already paid the initial consultation with the doctor. And and this can be very costly when you're talking about a family of 4, 5, 6 people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I'm that's a very interesting point because I actually was, unaware of that. I was under the assumption that majority of, medical clinics had typical vaccines that, like nationwide are just necessary for everyone. And so I'm curious, if that's the situation, do you recommend just going onto the USCIS website and looking for a civil surgeon? Because I think on USCIS's website, they have like the list of the exact vaccines.
They
So
do.
yeah,
Yeah, they
so even
do.
before, you go and, whether you do it through USCIS or you go, do it through another clinic of your choice, definitely take the time to just look at what USCIS mandates or is
Mm.
required, especially for the I-693, I believe that's the medical form, because, that in and of itself can also educate you, one, on not having to take unnecessary vaccines, but also just making sure you're up to date on all the ones that are absolutely necessary for adjusting your status.
Yeah. So what we've been recommending is just call the clinic before, like kind of shop around as well,
That too.
and people are, again, they're in a rush to get this process, out of the door as soon as possible. But sometimes it's, just take a few moments to like just call before, make sure, because at the end of the day, kind of, I think the doctor also has some discretionary, of like what you need or not. But yeah. And one of the questions here, like in our chat, is I was going to go that as well. There are a lot of people, that they have an I-140 approved with another petition, and now their new petition, either like their EB-3 petition or EB-2 petition, is current, and they're, especially people from India, they're thinking about using, their prior priority date, and transport that to their new petition. So that it's just, it's been like a lot of good news. And do you think that the travel ban has had an impact in this crazy, visibility movement?
I think it definitely impacts people who do consular processing over those who are
Mm,
adjusting their status in the United States, there's definitely a difference. To the
mhm,
extent, I mean, there definitely is, I think because the travel ban is in place, people outside are less likely to apply for the certain category visa. So therefore more visas are just available, which is why we're kind of seeing a movement and, things becoming a little more current in terms of the dates. And so, there's definitely an impact. That's not to say that just because they're like, for example, if you are part of the impacted countries, like that shouldn't necessarily dissuade you from starting a petition or looking into assembling like your package or anything like that, because travel bans, hopefully they're lifted soon, and if you wait until the travel ban lifts, then you're kind of prolonging the time in which you start assembling your package, and then that kind of pushes everything back based on your timeline. And that impact can prolong how long it takes for you to submit your I-140 petition and then get it approved and then adjust your status. And so, um, that's kind of my take on it. Lucas, I don't know what your take is on that.
yeah, I've seen like a lot of reports, from people that, from those countries, they are having an interview. The interviews are happening, but they are just being put on administrative processing until like further notice. So
Mhm.
we don't know like when this is going to happen, but when it does happen, that person is prepared. They already did the interview. They already did everything that they
Right.
could, and they're just waiting, until the administration decides to lift the ban. And
Mhm.
another thing that I was also wanted to discuss, because we're talking about both, adjustment status and consular process. Today, uh, I saw like on one of the social medias that I follow a very shocking case where someone in Brazil, she was a dentist and she had her EB-2 NIW approved. She did her interview, and Brazil is within those 75 countries, but she did not speak English. And before, you could probably pass the interview without any problem, but in her case she actually got her visa denied. So not only was it was not put on administrative processing or anything, it
Okay.
was straight up denied,
Oh, wow.
and they sent her case back to USCIS because she did not speak English. And we're just seeing like more and more scrutiny in the level of, are you actually prepared to advance your endeavor in the United States, to speak the languages? Do you already have something lined up, or things like that?
Yeah. And I think that, kind of tying it, like, are you well equipped to pursue your endeavor? I think that's why me and you, whenever we speak with clients, like we always say, like, those letters of intent, industry, validation, trying to have a great network. Not, if you're overseas, like having an overseas network is completely fine, but, even having some sort of connections in the United States can go like a really long way. And it's just so surprising to hear you say that just because she didn't, speak English, like they didn't even put it in like administrative holding. They just like straight up just sent it back to USCIS and, said no, which is very surprising. And I think, again, that goes to the scrutiny issue that we're seeing so much more of, and you see it a lot more. And I think it's interesting that we're seeing so many different types of denials, like things that we've never seen before, kind of
Mm.
creeping up and rearing its ugly head. And it only just goes to show like it's like kind of like a turbulent time within the immigration landscape. So very interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And with this travel ban as well, we might see a surge in RFEs from people that are change status or even adjust their status. We had a case recently that someone was changing their status, I believe, like from F1 to B1, or the opposite. And I believe he was from one of the actually 36 countries, which is more restrictive. And the RFE was very clear, like, hey, just prove that you're a good citizen. We have the discretion to approve you or not, and you need to prove that you're a good citizen. So yeah, the scrutiny is definitely increasing a lot in many, many, many levels, not just the I-140 stage, but also the NVC, the adjustment status, the consular process, and differently, than adjustment status, which if you're denied, you can ultimately appeal. If you're denied at a consular level,
Mhm.
there's no appeal. There's
Mhm.
no appeal. And I believe it was like last year, if I'm not wrong, that was like a crazy case that ended up to going to the Supreme Court, which was an immigration lawyer. She married a guy
Oh wow.
who apparently was involved with gangs and etc.
Mm.
He was denied at a consular level, and then she kept appealing and appealing, and then got to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court like basically said, hey, consular processes you cannot appeal at all. So um for those who are abroad, yes, there's always a risk. The consulate, they do have discretion to approve or not. A lot of people, they ask us, is the interview like merely like a procedural, is just merely administrative in purpose, or if they are an actual risk of denial. And what we've seen is in many cases they are asking very specific questions, especially if you are prepared to advance your endeavor. If they see anything that can sound like or smell like fraud, they are just being very, very careful.
Mhm.
Well, I think that's great. I mean, we covered pretty much the this jump in the visa bulletin, and I'm very, just very, very happy for everyone. I think especially for the people they have like EB-3,
Yeah.
because not in my wildest dreams I would ever think that the EB-3 category would ever be current. Like I'm I was very skeptical about it, but yeah, it's been wild times. Not and not everything is a bad news. I think like this jump is a very good news for many people that have been waiting for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, just going off of what you said, not everything is bad news. Sometimes it's good news. And so, when this opportunity arises, for us to just be able to share with everyone, and if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to definitely, reach out. So,
Great, great. Thank you so much, everyone.
all right.
Thank you, Philip.
Thank you.